SCP-6634, where the flood couldn't reach. Being caught in a survival situation is likely one of the most harrowing experiences a person could ever go through, and thankfully, most people will never have to be in one. Being caught in a survival situation in the SCP universe, however, is practically unthinkable, with things that defy the laws of reality potentially lurking around every corner. SCP-6634 features an SCP researcher stuck in a deep cave while studying an anomaly, forcing her to try and survive for a few days before she can be rescued. While that scenario might sound a bit simplistic, SCP-6634 is rather unique in that the entire experience is showcased through an interactive point-and-click game. Let's take a look. The experience begins with the sound of a loud cave-in, after which Dr. Indira Sangara, who survived said cave-in, is contacted by the MTF commander, O'Quill. Sangara is disoriented, but manages to grab her radio and respond. O'Quill tells her that there was a collapse when her and Agent Chen entered the cave, but they're already working on trying to get them out. She's uninjured, but she states that Chen is dead. O'Quill tells her to check for a pulse, because if she can keep him alive, they'll be out of there within the hour, but she tells him that his head has been crushed. O'Quill swears and tells her to move his body away from the cave entrance, but be careful, as they don't want any of the rubble to fall on her during the excavation. We see Sangara's surroundings now, a small cave with several unusual species of plants nearby, as well as Chen's body. Sangara scolds the commander for lessening the security protocols, as this is only their second expedition into the cave, but O'Quill just tells her that now isn't the time. They're going to start excavating, so she should just find a place to camp out and keep herself occupied. It's still unclear what we're dealing with, but fortunately Sangara is carrying a tablet containing the documentation for SCP-6634. It bears the Euclid object class, and the containment procedures mention that any individuals that go into the cave must be fully decontaminated to prevent the potential spread of 6634 outside of the cave. The containment procedures initially mentioned that the cave bore minimal risk and had breathable atmosphere, so only small teams with minimal equipment are necessary, but Sangara has now crossed that section out. SCP-6634 is a prolific, black, wool-like alga that grows at the bottom of the saltwater pools in Minhua Cave in China. Its primary source of energy is currently unknown, but results in the production of ketones, methane, and oxygen, causing the oxygen and methane content of the cave to be higher than that of Earth's atmosphere. It has adapted to rely on several ketones for respiration, and does not require glucose, with its cells not containing chloroplasts. They instead contain an organelle that allows for a form of autotrophy, in which they make their own food, that has created an ecosystem around it made up entirely of carnivores. 6634 and all life in that ecosystem are endemic to the cavern, with 7 species, including 6634, currently having been discovered. None of the other species have been observed to be anomalous, with all of them being descended from marine species that have split somewhere from 485 to 462 million years ago. It's currently estimated that the cave was sealed off sometime between the early to mid-Ordovician period, which began 485 million years ago. To summarize all that then, we have a very ancient cave that became sealed off from the rest of the world a long time ago, but has managed to sustain its own little ecosystem thanks to this anomalous algae. There's nothing especially crazy about that, but it's an anomaly that needs to be studied by the Foundation, and they thought that expeditions into the cave were pretty safe. Unfortunately, now a cave-in has occurred, and Sangara is left in there by herself, for now. Sangera heads into a smaller offshoot of the main cave, finding it to be dry and relatively secluded, so she sets up her meager camp. She asks O'Quill how much longer, but he tells her that she's going to be down there a bit longer than expected. The excavation team wants to make sure the entire cave doesn't collapse on her. He tells her to keep the bait that she brought with away from the wildlife, and even though it won't taste good, it's at least edible. She asks about water, and although he mentions that there's a lake down there, she explains that that's salt water. She asks if he read anything she had written down before he lessened the safety measures, but he just tells her not to be dramatic and says that she has a water bottle. It won't be more than a few days before they get her out, and he'll be on the other end of the radio the whole time. She decides to take a short rest, and when she gets up, O'Quill tells her that they're still surveying, and they're going to bring out the ground-penetrating radar. Sangera decides to spend some time examining the various species in the cave. She looks towards the tea lily, a plant with a basket-like cup at the top that has adapted to collect water that drips off the stalactites. Inside of the top portion, they found a number of previously assumed extinct creatures, with it assumed that the plants survived off of the waste from the creatures. While inspecting one, however, Sangera discovers that the tea lilies are not completely watertight, and she realizes that they're actually filtering the microbes out of the water for the creatures to eat, so that it's a mutually beneficial arrangement. Also attached to the base of the tea lily is a small veinor worm, which also feeds on the concentrated microbes, upsetting the balance of the arrangement. Sangera realizes that she can potentially use the tea lily to filter water for her to drink out of her bottle, so she plucks the tea lily off the wall, discarding the veinor worm. O'Quill asks her if that's safe, but she counters that he told her not to be so dramatic about safety. She next inspects a small pool of water nearby, which contains a number of different species, including the algae. One species has been dubbed driftworms, and bears a number of traits convergent with cnidarians, such as jellyfish, most notably the free-floating lifestyle and the presence of stinging cells. There's a species similar to the tea lilies that they're calling crab pots, which have evolved into the shape of a fish trap. Occasionally, a driftworm will become trapped within one and be consumed. There are also creatures similar to the ones in the tea lilies, with these possessing a hardened, knife-like proboscis, which they use to scrape off and consume food particles caught in the crab pot's arms. With little else to do, and at least possessing a source of food and water, Sangera goes back to camp to try and get some rest. O'Quill wakes her up via the radio the next morning, with Sangera complaining about her neck pain from sleeping here. He tells her that they can confidently say they'll get her out on the 24th, so she's in there for 2 more days. When she emerges from the camp, however, she swears, as Agent Chen's body is no longer there. Considering how sealed off and isolated the cave is, that definitely is a cause for concern. She also notices that the veinor worm she discarded on the ground has attracted a new species, which are currently feasting on it. Sangera believes them to be an extinct form of arthropod, with them almost looking like an isopod, so she dubs them Pillbugs. She takes a couple of them, placing one nearby as bait for some other creature, and one in the small pool of water. She also grabs a couple of the driftworms, discovering that they no longer sting when out of water, and places them around as well. She then proceeds back to her camp to whittle away the time some more. Eventually, she grows too bored of sitting around, and heads back out into the larger cave. She sees another unusual sight, what looks to be a large horseshoe crab trying to crack open one of the pillbugs. She then realizes that it's an extinct creature known as a sea scorpion, the largest of which is known to have grown to over 8 feet long. She notices that it seems to be blowing air over its gills, allowing it to be entirely terrestrial. Inspecting the pool of water again, she finds it to be a hive of activity, with 3 new species inside. One is a creature that looks like a slug, while another is an eel-like species called a conodont, which Sangera guesses might have been hiding in the algae. The third new species is the strangest of them all, a colonial organism floating throughout the pool. Sangera says that there's no way this was hiding in the algae, so she has no idea how it got here or even really what species it closely resembles. O'Quill says that they haven't found any connecting caves or anything like that, so he suggests that maybe she look around, as there could be a secondary anomaly. Before moving on, she tries grabbing one of the eel creatures, but it's too slippery, so instead she puts a driftworm inside one of the crab pots. The eel creature slips inside, becoming trapped and allowing Sangera to easily grab it. She then splits it in half, placing one half on the ground as bait and the other at the bottom of the pool. She then decides to inspect the algae a bit closer, taking a risk and placing her hand into one clump of it. Her hand reaches a curve in liquid, and then she feels air. She parts the algae and can see the bottom of the pool through it. She thinks that she could actually go into it, but O'Quill quickly tells her no. Sangera argues that the wildlife seem to be able to traverse it just fine, but O'Quill says that not entering a spatial anomaly without preparation is day 1 field training. In the end, she decides against it, and just notes that the algae generate food thanks to the energy from creatures moving between the cave and the extra-dimensional space. Having done enough research for now, Sangera heads back to get some rest. When she wakes up and checks out the cave again, she finds yet another new species feeding on the dead eel creature, this one being a trilobite. She remarks that this one can sort of wiggle its spines, which are usually solid in fossils, so she dubs it the Wiggle Trilobite. Of course, in the pool of water, there's also another new species, this one resembling a large slug creature, possibly an adult form of the other slugs. She guesses that the extra-dimensional space in the algae must be quite large to accommodate this many species of this size, let alone whatever got to Agent Chen. She manages to pick up the large slug, noting how hefty it is, and she places it on the ground in the hopes of attracting some other species, hoping that it won't just leave. She bides some more time in the rest area, and soon O'Quill tells her that they're going to be getting her out first thing in the morning. Exiting her rest cave, she finds the largest new species yet, very likely what ate Chen, a massive radiodont that's currently devouring the big slug. Despite it really only going after slow-moving or dead prey, Sangera decides to keep her distance and heads back into her rest cave to sleep until her rescue. She's woken up to the sound of rocks being moved and an MTF agent calling out for her. She tells them to keep their distance from the big radiodont, but she's safely rescued. We're then given the final version of the 6634 documentation, containing all of the new information Sangera managed to obtain during her time down there, including info on a large number of new species. It's noted that the extra-dimensional space was discovered during her expedition, but has not yet been mapped out. With that, that's the end of the experience. Or rather, that's one possible ending. Granted, it's certainly the best case ending, but let's take a quick look at the other possibilities. The first would be the case in which Sangera simply doesn't think to attach the tea lily to her water bottle in order to extend her water supply. Her water supply runs dry on the second day, and despite O'Quill telling her that the water from eating the bait should keep her alive, she feels that it's too salty to help. She continues to rest as much as possible, and is eventually found unresponsive once they excavate the cavern. She's admitted to the medical ward, and is expected to make a full recovery. At least it's better than some alternatives. Another ending involves Sangera solving her water issue, but she simply sits in her rest cave until rescue, not ever noticing that Chen's body disappears. It seems to be a rather uncharacteristic path for her, as it does feel more likely that she would step out at least once to poke around, but all that really differs is that she's surprised to learn that his body isn't where she left it, and the documentation mentions that his whereabouts are currently unknown. The last possible ending is also the most tragic, and it simply involves Sangera completely disregarding her training and O'Quill's warnings, deciding to further investigate the extra-dimensional space in the algae. She says that a few seconds of looking around won't hurt anyone, but it then immediately cuts to the updated 6634 documentation. It now states that Dr. Sangera became lost in the extra-dimensional space after disregarding instruction to not advance into the anomaly alone. The Foundation certainly has protocols for a reason, after all. And that's it. From the perspective of a typical SCP article, 6634 is rather realistic, with nothing extremely anomalous occurring, and is mostly just a scientist discovering some long-lost extinct species in an isolated cave before being rescued. Obviously, what sets 6634 apart is its presentation, and while the actual mechanics of the experience are quite simple, its execution and uniqueness ensure its memorability. I can personally think of plenty of other articles that I'd love to see presented in this same style, or even an entire SCP game, as it reminds me of some classic, serious-toned point-and-click adventure games such as The Dig. There isn't really an in-universe explanation for why the article is presented in this way, like it was in SCP-245, the SCP RPG, but SCPs over the years have experienced plenty of different format screws without requiring an explanation. If there is a canon ending here, I hope that it's the one where Sangera proved herself to be an excellent researcher, discovering all the different species. But perhaps that's just the optimist in me.